The headlines say recovery, GDP up, confidence up, inflation easing. It reads like a press release written by someone who doesn't shop for groceries. Jarrod Kerr will tell you technically the data is improving. And he's right. Technically. But technically fine is what your date says when you ask if everything's okay and she answers, I'm fine. Which means prepare for impact. Because at the kitchen table, most people still feel squeezed. Cash flow tight, mortgage still heavy, wages crawling. This is the awkward phase of every cycle. It's like watching the scoreboard say you're ahead while half the team is cramping. Jarrod, what does recovery actually mean in this environment?
Well, it means we're starting to grow. It means we are recovering literally from a really bad recession, a recession that hit us hard and it lasted 2 years. And we are starting to climb out of that hole. Why don't you feel it? Well, you haven't received a proper pay rise in the last year or so. And inflation is running above whatever pay rise you did get. So that is still hurting many households. And it is double-sided, right? We want incomes to be increasing, and firms are still very nervous, and they're still very nervous about increasing hours and increasing headcount. So from what we can see in the data, we aren't seeing a lot of wage pressure at all. In fact, wages are running about 2%, which is really low. Inflation's running at 3.1, and if you're on a lower income, it's running more like 4+ percent. So you're running on that treadmill, but you're not getting anywhere. And unfortunately, your bills, your groceries, your petrol rates, if you have to pay them, they've all gone up in double digits over the last year. So it's painful for many people, and it's going to take time to normalize. What we need to see this year is incomes running above inflation, and we need that to happen for a while before households feel better about life. We hope we see that this year, but, it's taking time.
And the reality is, if you get too much wage growth, it causes inflation. And we're right on that cusp.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can handle wages growing a lot more than 2%, and we need inflation back to 2%. So, yeah, we need that to flip. I'd love to see wages growing at 3+% and inflation, at 2%. We need to sort of flip that on its head.
What sectors are genuinely improving and what are just stabilizing?
It is broad based. I'm very impressed with our exporters. Our exporters are doing really well. They're getting high prices for their commodities, and we're starting to see service exports coming back. So tourism's about 95% of where it was pre-COVID. So that's good. We're hearing and we're seeing manufacturing improve. That helps with a strong Australian economy and a weak Kiwi dollar, or Kiwi Aussie, I should say.
Yes.
That's helping. And then we are seeing, a little bit more confidence in retailers and construction areas that have been really hit hard. So they're coming back, but some areas are stabilizing, like I said, construction, retail, and other areas are doing quite well.
You mentioned the New Zealand dollar against the Australian. I think it's 85 cents. Tourism New Zealand should be throwing all its money into Australia at the moment, getting them over here, because that's a great opportunity to bring more Australians to New Zealand.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely. And the Australian economy is running, so much better than ours. They are hiking rates over there. And they're doing so because there's a little bit of inflation, but because their economy didn't go through the recession like ours. Their central bank handled coming out of the pandemic so much better than ours. And that's why we're seeing a record number of Kiwis leaving New Zealand to go and work in Australia. In terms of Aussie tourism, the Aussie numbers have bounced back really strongly. So we are getting a bunch of Australians coming here, but absolutely agree. There's 25 million of them. Let's get a few more coming down here and spending money.
Across from here.
Sorry.
Yeah, down. We'll go across, not down.
Actually, yeah, fair point, across.
Unless you're in Wellington where you are down, but no, we'll stay across. Could an early OCR hike stall income growth?
Yeah, look, if it's too early, like we said before, if it's too early and it hurts the economy, then yes, that'll hurt income growth straight away. So I do think the central bank needs to take their time to make sure that we are, really recovering and gaining momentum. To your point, I don't think we're there yet. So if they do hike in the next 6 to 9 months, probably will be too early, and it probably will cause a little too much damage.
Yeah, if rates were to rise before incomes recover, what happens to resilience?
Well, it hurts, right? If you're already struggling with general inflation, groceries and all that sort of stuff, and then you might have a mortgage, that the cost of your mortgage going up is just a double whammy. You've been hit by general inflation, and then all of a sudden you hit with higher interest rates. It's obviously going to hurt a household where they haven't recovered their hours worked or wages.
Because at the end of last year, you and I were talking about that elephant in the room recovery and how to turn it around. It seems recovery or the confidence has returned early in 2026, and yet it could reverse so quickly again.
Yeah, we've got to be careful. We've got to be careful. We are running into an election that people are worried about. There's still a lot of noise offshore, and I do say noise. I don't think it's what we're seeing offshore is going to hurt us, but there's a lot of uncertainty, and fair enough. So we do need to be very careful, and there's nothing wrong with letting the economy, recover fully and start running, at full pace again before you tighten policy.
Historically, we seem to have been not too bad when there has been a recession overseas or things have taken hits simply because of the economic policies first set up by the fourth Labour government, 40 years ago. When you look back, what will historians say about what went wrong about this period after COVID?
Oh, look, I mean, we're already looking back. There's even a review being done on monetary policy, right? We are looking back and we're trying to learn from our mistakes. Now, what did we do? As soon as COVID hit, we slashed interest rates. We then started embarking on quantitative easing, which is basically printing money to buy bonds to push interest rates even lower. There was a lot that the government did. I think the initial response by everyone was fantastic, but we overdid it. In the end, monetary policy was too loose for too long. And we ended up with this massive surge in inflation, which we then had to tackle. So I remember being in the war rooms with other chief economists, with treasury officials, with RBNZ officials, and we just had no idea what was actually happening, how much damage it was going to cause. And you're presented with two possible outcomes, really. You overstimulate and you get the economy bouncing back harder and faster and generating a lot of inflation, or you don't do enough. And if you don't do enough, you risk the economy not only falling into a recession, but going into a depression, because we had no idea how much damage COVID lockdowns were actually going to do. So of those two options, any central banker would say, I'd rather tackle inflation than trying to get an economy out of depression all day, every day. That's the option I'd rather handle. So they got that option, luckily enough. and they hiked to get inflation back down. I argue they hiked too much for too long, but they got inflation back, under 3% temporarily, and I think it'll run below 3% at the end of this year. So there's a lot we can learn and go back and say, okay, we did too much here, too much here, too much here. But do you know what? We got out of it. We tackled inflation. Most of us are pretty happy that inflation will get back to 2% and, job done. But hey, there's a lot of learnings.
Yeah, except the coalition is going to bring this report out maybe 3 or 4 weeks before the actual election itself, when they could have done this report just after they came to power. So it seems to me to be more of a political point scoring thing, because really we don't need a report when you've basically just answered what anyone with common sense knows happened in the election, happened in the COVID years. Don't you agree?
Look, I think most people get what I just said.
Yeah.
And I guess having a review, they're gonna go through, every decision, every bond that was bought by the central bank. I think it's fair to review and question whether it's a bit of a political stunt into an election. I'll leave that for you to comment. But from my point of view, there's a lot of learnings there, and there will be another crisis that hits us in the future. And knowing what works and what doesn't, I think is pretty good for the next pandemic, the next earthquake, the next, you know what I mean? There's going to be something in the next 10 years.
Recoveries look impressive from a helicopter. On the ground, it's slower, messier, like returning from injury and pretending the knee is fine. If policy tightens into that fragility, the scoreboard might still look okay. The players just start limping again. And most people are tired of limping.